All right, so playwright Rob Klein recently stated, "I was most struck with Wood's meteoric path from local eccentric painter to globally recognized savior of American art to an embarrassing footnote in art history, and all within a 10-year span. The story illuminates the role of the artists in the time of a social upheaval and crisis, as well as America's shifting national consciousness through economic depression and global war." How do you feel about this quote? Do you agree with this statement or disagree, and why?
I agree with the statement, and particularly the part about embarrassing something at the end. And I think that that's a topic for days-long discussions probably, because it came to a close, which became an embarrassment, because he died when he was 42 years old, 41, going to be 42 years old. And there simply was no one there to carry his legacy forward for about 60, 70, 80 years. And so, I mean, fully carry it forward. There were 2 or 3 books written up after 1942 and one show at the Whitney, but not enough to really give him his due credit for his awesome history in painting. So I agree with what Klein says about being, he was an eccentric guy, and he did so much. He was such a diverse artist. He was not only painting and printmaking, but also wood, and he sculpted stone, metal works. He made furniture, and he jewelry, and in this house he hammered copper, and he sculpted stone. He did all kinds of things, and so there's a great body of work that he has. And of course in 1935, when he came to the university on the faculty, he was the most famous artist in America. So there was something really to work with to make a great legacy, and Klein is correct that it's an embarrassing to us when he died. We're trying to fix that to increase his legacy and polish his legacy. But there are several factors, and Klein mentions the socioeconomic upheaval, not only here with the Depression, but we're getting into a war with Germany. There are a lot of critics of the kind of art that Grant Wood and John Stuart Curry and Thomas Hart Benton were making, the regionalism art. But what really cooked it for Wood and created the situation that Klein can call it an embarrassing end was his treatment here at the University of Iowa. And there were several factors of that. One being the fact that Wood was hired on the faculty, first a lecturer, then an assistant professor. And he was hired as a part of what's called, even today, nationally and internationally, the Iowa Idea. And the Iowa Idea was something that was put together back in 1922 by the president at that time and Dr. Seashore. And that is that a person with Grant Wood's education, which was a high school education, with some additional training in Paris and Italy and Germany, Minneapolis, and different places, but he only had a high school education when he came here. And that fit into the Iowa Idea, which was to expand the arts program here so studio arts would mesh with art history. And even a person like Grant Wood, who didn't have a PhD, could be a professor and could hand out degrees, master's degrees and PhDs to people who offered a painting instead of a thesis. And that was really a big deal. But that alone created some animosity here at the university with the PhDs. Then he was the most famous artist in America, and that irritated some faculty here at the university. But the dog whistle that created the embarrassing end that Klein talks about, the dog whistle was his homosexuality. And that's what Lester Longman, who was the head of the art department when Grant Wood died, and a guy named Horst Jansen, who was an art historian and wrote textbooks, left Grant Wood out completely. And until just a few years ago, he was still out completely in Jansen's updates of the textbook. So those two people savaged Grant Wood in his last years here at the University of Iowa. And if they were trying to run him out of the university, and President Hancher stepped in and promoted Wood to full professorship to try to level things out. And then Grant Wood died. There wasn't anybody to support him, nationally or here. They just folded their tents here at the university and never talked about him again, never spoke of him for 60-some years until I started the Grant Wood Art Colony. We thought, this is enough of this. We've got to make this right for Grant Wood. So that's what goes into Klein's embarrassing end.
Yeah, I guess it says in the quote that he was recognized as the savior of American art. Do you elaborate on that? Do you believe he was?
As we said, he was the most famous artist in America because of American Gothic and regionalism. We talked about also pre-American Gothic and post-American Gothic. In the pre-American Gothic, he was trying to do what a lot of other American and foreign artists were doing, and that was Impressionism, getting away from figuration, getting away from realism sort of things. And he tried that for a while, and then he came back and he studied German artists for a while. And he liked their detail, he liked their realism. And then he decided that he was going to paint what he saw, paint his surroundings. And that became regionalism. Instead of abstract or dado or whatever might have been at the time, cubism, he decided, I'm going to paint what I like and what people like. And that's the hills, that's the houses, that's the people that we see in his paintings. And by God, people like that. And they still like it. Exhibit A is the American Gothic at the Art Institute of Chicago, where crowds just surge through that place to this day. And it's the most famous, most popular painting of all their exhibits is Grant Wood's American Gothic. And so that says something. It says that people they like to know what they're looking at, and they relate to something. One of our board members, Wanda Korn, is a very famous American art historian, and she's doing a new book. She did the second book on Grant Wood. I have it here, The Vision of Regionalism, Grant Wood. But she's doing a new book. This is her third now, and it's going to be on the American Gothic and the man and the woman in the American Gothic. And that's going to be it, just man and woman. There's been a lot of controversy or who the man was and who the woman was. Is it the man's wife or the man's daughter or the man's sister or, all that kind of stuff. And so she's going to highlight the fact that it's a man and it's a woman, and you can decide what they are. There's been so much questioning and controversy, and just people back then they almost got into fistfights over whether it was the daughter, the sister, or the wife. And so I thought that was really fascinating that she's just, the title of the book is almost A Man, a Woman, and then leave it. And I think that was Grant Wood's way of looking at it was, I'm going to paint this beautiful painting with a beautiful, cool house behind it and beautiful sky and beautiful everything. And you can all decide what it is that you like about it. But sometimes, I won't even say oftentimes say, but I sometimes say that my view of the American Gothic, and let's say an abstract Richard Serra or Jackson Pollock, 90% of the people look at American Gothic, they love it, and they take something back. They know what they're looking at. They know they're looking at a man and a woman, in a rural scene with a barn and a house, and they like it. The other 10% look at Richard Serra. I happen to like Richard Serra, and I like Pollock, but they look, and they see something too, but I'll take the 90% that can see something in Grant Wood's paintings. And that's what we all are trying to get his name and his vision out to those 90% and have the people who can identify American Gothic with his name. Because a lot of people, they'll say, I'll say Grant Wood, live in Grant Wood's house. Who's Grant Wood? The pitchfork and the lady. Oh, yeah. But so who painted it? I don't know. Well, we're going to try to fix that. And that is building his legacy.
All right. So this is going to be a three-part question. First, you've obviously never met Grant Wood, but it appears as though you've got this special relationship with him. If you were to meet him in the afterlife, what would be the first thing that you would say to him?
Well, I'd first introduce myself and tell him that I live in his house in Iowa City. I'd probably tell him how famous he still is after American Gothic and a long period of time since he painted American Gothic. I'd probably tell him that there have been several books written about him. There have been exhibitions at the Whitney in New York City twice now, and that we started a Grant Wood Art Colony here at the house. Those are the first things I'd probably say to him.
Second, what is a question that you've always wanted to ask him?
I've really always wanted to know we know about his pre-American Gothic paintings, you know, the Impressionist kind of stuff. We know about his post-American Gothic paintings until he died in 1942. But I don't think anybody really questioned him and asked about what's your next phase? Because modernism and abstract painting was coming in at that time. Was he thinking of delving into that? Was he going to stay tackling the whole regionalism question? That's kind of what I'd like to know from him.
And lastly, what would you like to tell him about your life at 1142?
Well, it's been such a treat to live at 1142. And I think that he and I appreciate some of the same artwork and landscaping and design, partying, that sort of thing. And I just tell him how much I've really enjoyed the 40 plus years that I've lived here since 1975. And tell him how remarkable the house has been. Of course, he loved the house and the history of the house when he came. He loved the previous owners, the Oakes family, who built the house in 1855, 1858. And he wanted to leave them a legacy as well. So when he restored the house, he wanted to restore it back to its original luster, let's say. And Dr. Moore, who bought the house from his estate, kept it very much as his. I would probably tell him that I have retained the essence of things that he did, but that I've changed it for my own living style. And it's really been a wonderful center of gatherings of people. And I tell him that we've added the Grantwood Art Colony, which surrounds the house. I think he'd be happy about that. So those are the main things.
You mentioned that you had a love for art that you shared with Grant Wood. Was that what attracted you to the house originally, or did you kind of come about it? Did you find the house first and then get into Grant Wood and art? Or
I had an essential knowledge of Grant Wood from most school kids do some period of time. Mine came later because my first knowledge about Grant Wood was when I was in college. But I just really liked what I saw in his paintings, always have. And that's another thing I would tell him when I first saw him, was that his American Gothic is, by some accounts, the second most recognized painting in the world, second only to the Mona Lisa. It gets stunning crowds at the Art Institute of Chicago. Their biggest crowds are gathered for his painting, American Gothic. And I'd pick his brain about, why do you think that is? I mean, you know why you loved American Gothic, and you know how you painted that, why you painted that. But obviously, those same attentions have fascinated millions and millions of people through the 80 years now that he's been dead. So clearly I had that kind of curiosity about his paintings as I went from college. So I knew something about Grant Wood when I moved into the carriage house behind and rented in the carriage house. I had met Park Reinert, who was his assistant here at the house, when I was working for the governor for the state. And Park was a speechwriter for the governor. So we got to be pretty good friends. And so after I bought the house, Park told me lots and lots of stuff about Grant Wood and about his things that he did in Iowa City and in the house. And then I met a lady who lived next door and watched Grant Wood painting Parson Weems' Fable in his studio upstairs. And she told me lots of things about Grant Wood when she lived next to him and talked to him. And then his sister, Nan, the woman in American Gothic, I became pretty good friends with her, and she was here a couple of times. And she told me stories about Grant Wood. So I learned, after I bought the house, more and more about Grant Wood. And then it became apparent that there's this huge gap out in the public after he died and until the Grant Wood Art Colony came along. There's this big gap of people learning about Grant Wood. And so after I started the Grant Wood Art Colony, then I really became much more knowledgeable about him.
We recognize that your life accomplishments supersede Grant Wood, but at the very least, you have an uncommon connection to him, his life, accomplishments, and his travails. How did you begin your connection to Grant Wood? Was it his art or his life story, or because you bought his house, or something different, or all of the above?
Well, I'd have to say all of the above. The comparison is a little too flattering for me, but thank you very much. I think I earlier said that the intense kind of knowledge of Grant Wood came slowly after I had bought the house. I came from a farm family, Irish farmers, they're always interested in art and the arts, and they made sure that the 4 kids did art in some way or another. We all had musical instruments. My brother became a playwright, went to the writer's workshop here, and ended up at the University of Toronto. And sister Rose she started painting when she was in 6th or 7th grade, I think, and she's quite accomplished special ed teacher. Sister Kathleen was a teacher and drama and acting and that sort of thing. So everybody was involved. I mean, we appreciate art. I'm not a creative artist. I don't paint. I don't make lithographs or anything like that. But I do enjoy art, and I very much enjoy Wood's art. I also enjoy a wide array of artistry. I enjoy modern art, abstract art, but I really enjoy the figuration as well. And one thing that we see, and I think this fits into the question, one thing we see today is that some of the up-and-coming artists in America are going back to figuration as Wood was. He was a figurative artist, realistic artist, and that includes regionalism. And we're pretty happy about that with the Grant Wood Art Colony. And the University of Iowa Museum is very interested in that as well. So all of that is wrapped up in my vision of art and how I enjoy art. And you know, in this house, I'm surrounded by Grant Wood's artistry. I mentioned to you before that Grant Wood's sister, Nan, who was in the American Gothic picture, was here a couple of times. And she told me that Grant considered his restoration of this house his finest artistic achievement. And so as I look around, as I live here every day for 47, 48 years now, I see something created by him every day, sometimes something that I just haven't noticed quite as well before. And so it's nice being surrounded by Grant Wood and his creativity and his beauty all the time. And that helps me in my understanding of his work and appreciation of his work. But you know, in Iowa, people are so in love with Grant Wood. Kids are taught about Grant Wood in grammar school and junior high and high school. And when our fellows go out into the state in part of their program, the kids are just excited about seeing a Grant Wood painter, a Grant Wood lithographer come to their school and tell them something about Grant Wood. So he's alive and well, and that keeps my interest up as well.
Let's speak for a minute about right brain, left brain. How does a genius level mind decide to delve into the art world, and why Grant Wood? This is not an investment by someone looking for cocktail conversation. This appears to be a life mission. We've touched on this before, but we're curious.
Well, I am I can't remember which is which, left and right, but I think right brain is creativity maybe, and is that right? I'm not left brain at all. I learned early in my schooling that I was not going to be a doctor, I was not going to be a scientist. I really enjoyed history and I enjoyed the arts and that sort of thing. So I think being a right brain then has fit into everything that has solidified my interest in Grant Wood. And as I said before, all artists. I mean, if I go to a museum, I don't just stop at realism or regionalism. I mean, I want to see everything. I guess that I could just differentiate myself as not being a left brain person, and have been very happy in doing the right brain stuff as a lawyer and doing what I can with that right brain.
We feel, this is kind of moving over to a different topic, we feel that the fellows to a certain extent represent the modernization of the Grantwood movement, or certainly have played a role in the future, or will play a role in the future of the movement. What role do you think the fellows play, and is the fellows program working in your estimation?
I'll answer the last part first. Yes, I definitely think the fellows are doing the part that they were intended to do. And that goes back to 2009 when I started the Grantwood program, which was symposium and lectures and things like that. And then 2 years later, we started the Grantwood Art Colony with fellows. We always have a painter and a printmaker and a performing artist. And I have room for 7 in the Grantwood houses behind and around me. And so we soon will have an art historian and a writer from Writer's Workshop. So that's 5 of the 7. Then we'll be looking for sculpture and public art after that and fill up the 7. But I believe that the fellowship program, where we bring in a fellow in each of those areas for a year, I think the key part of the program, and which makes it so valuable in the state and nationally, is that each fellow is appointed to the faculty here at the University of Iowa. And that's very key for them, and it's very key for us because it makes us, I feel, the premier fellowship program in America today. They come for a year, they get a nice stipend, they get their place to live, their family can stay with them. So it's really wonderful. And then they go out into the state and they take their art making out into the state, and they talk with Iowans and tell them about Grantwood and their art making. And now we have 36 fellows, former fellows, out in the country, and some of them overseas. And that's pretty cool. And now they've soaked up Grantwood when they were here, and now they have taken Grantwood to Philadelphia and LA and New York City and Tokyo and wherever they are. So it's certainly fulfilling the goal that we had.
I do have a question, if you don't mind. Has there ever been like a fellow's work that has really spoken to you and you've just really fallen in love with their work?
I mean, I can remember several, but I use Josh Henderson as an example of the quality of fellow that we are getting in the program and always have. But Josh was here 2 years ago, and Josh Henderson is from New York City. I think he was 31 when he came to the program. And he was classically trained Juilliard violinist who did hip hop, jazz, rock, all of that. Big personality, great kid. And he has a trio in New York City called Warp Trio. And he had so much energy that he not only had the fellowship here, but he was still teaching at NYU once a week, and he'd fly back and teach for an hour and then come back to Iowa City. But he did so much for the program in that he excited the students. And so at the music building in the auditorium, he filled them. And the kids absolutely loved him. Everybody loved him. He'd get up there and just rock the place. And then his last performance was with the University of Iowa Symphony. And he played from memory an hour and a half of Beethoven, which I thought was quite amazing. So he's kind of the person that but we have one of our painters is down at the University of Virginia, painting faculty there. He's head of the painting faculty there. We have one of our earlier fellows, a painter who is the head of the program, painting program at Boston College. We have a dancer who has a wonderful dance studio in Philadelphia. I mean, they're all over, but they're just such talented people. When we first started the colony, and the School of Art and History and the Performing Arts they each have a selection committee of 5 faculty, and our director is the chair. She doesn't vote. But when we started in 2011, not 2011, but 2012, we had 452 applications for 2 positions. Now, that's dropped down to maybe 80 to 100 per application, but we really get the best of the best.
I have
Another question. Do you think Greg would be proud of the art colonies? Because he started the art colonies of his own. We learned that in class. He started something similar to it. I mean, back in the day. Do you think he'd be proud to see how art?
I think he'd be delighted. Yes, he had, he started a Grantwood Art Colony in Stone City, which is near Anamosa, Iowa, at a big old quarry that's still in existence up there. And in 1932, he had like 120 people living in dormitory-like places, and they painted up old ice wagons, the guys did, and lived in those. And then the next year, keep in mind this is during the Depression, and so he had half as many people the next year. And then in 1934, he was invited to lecture here at the University of Iowa, and so he didn't have the art colony. So it was in operation 2 years. So that was, I suppose, if you look at a direct connection, a direct reason for the name and for the colony, in addition to the program that we had for lectures and symposia, was his colony. We thought, well, you know, he tried it, and it was really wonderful back in 1932, 1933. Let's do this again. I mean, it's a different format, of course, but yeah, I think he'd be really happy.